In a solitary flower weeping blood-red drops of dew, a mystery lay hidden, drawing Alice into the darkness of a supernatural realm where restless souls lingered. In an old wooden house on the outskirts of Willow Creek, Vermont, the evening sun bathed the room in an eerie crimson glow, reflecting off the glossy leaves of an exotic plant standing alone on the windowsill. Drops resembling blood trickled slowly down its stem, creating an illusion of weeping that sent chills down the spine. Alice, a young woman with long chestnut hair cascading softly over her shoulders and deep gray eyes filled with the pain of loss, stood before this flower, feeling a coldness pierce through her. Fragile yet resilient, she wore a simple pastel dress that accentuated her slender frame and natural grace. Alice had recently lost her husband, David, a tall, broad-shouldered man with a warm smile, strong arms that always protected her, and a kind heart that warmed everyone around. David had died from a prolonged illness that slowly drained his life, leaving Alice in an emptiness where every memory of him, his laughter, tender embraces by the fireplace, shared walks in the park, cut her heart like a sharp knife. A vacation at a luxurious spa hotel amidst the picturesque mountains of Vermont was meant to be an escape from this unbearable grief, a way to flee the pain by breathing the fresh air of forests and listening to the whispers of nature. But returning home to the quiet town of Willow Creek opened the door to a mystical enigma hidden in the solitary flower that wept as if mourning an unresolved grievance from the past. Upon returning from her vacation, Alice unlocked the door to her cozy apartment on Maple Street, where every corner was steeped in memories of David. The walls were adorned with faded family photographs where they smiled, holding hands, and the windowsills were lined with potted plants that Alice tended with love, as David had called them, symbols of hope and new beginnings. But that evening, the air in the apartment felt heavy, as if infused with an invisible threat lurking in the silence. Alice immediately noticed that her beloved flowers had wilted. Their stems drooped lifelessly, leaves yellowed and curled, as if death had touched them in her absence. Her closest friend Kate, an energetic blonde with a stylish, short haircut, vibrant green eyes sparkling with optimism, and a cheerful demeanor that always lifted spirits, had promised to water the plants during Alice's vacation. Kate called just as Alice entered the apartment, her voice trembling with genuine guilt. "Alice, how was your trip? Tell me everything." It must have been incredible. 5-course organic meals, relaxing massages, lavender-scented spa treatments, and all around. The dense forests of Vermont, where the air is fresh like a fairy tale, filled with the scent of pines and wild mint. Alice sighed, surveying the sad, wilted stems on the windowsill, and responded with a hint of disappointment. "Kate, my flowers are gone. You promised to water them. What happened?" Kate faltered, her voice growing quieter, filled with remorse. "I'm so sorry, Alice. Please forgive me. My mom got sick suddenly, and I had to be with her in the hospital running for medicines. I couldn't properly care for your plants. I feel awful." Alice, trying to suppress her irritation, knowing Kate wasn't to blame, walked through the apartment, touching the dry leaves with her fingers. Long shadows from the setting sun, filtering through sheer curtains, cast eerie silhouettes on the walls, as if ghosts of the past watched her every move, whispering something indistinct. She had to throw out most of the plants, as they were beyond saving, but one flower remained untouched. An exotic plant with broad, glossy leaves and delicate, almost translucent petals stood in a small puddle of water, as if someone had deliberately spilled it. Drops trickled down its leaves, appearing red in the crimson glow of the sunset, like blood from a wound. Alice felt a sudden chill run across her skin, though all the windows were tightly shut. She recalled an old legend she'd heard in childhood from Willow Creek's elders. If a flower suddenly weeps without reason, it's a sign that an offended soul is trying to reach the living, foretelling a chain of misfortunes and trials. Alice's life was already steeped in pain. David's loss had left a void in her heart. The house felt cold and alien without his warmth, and the loneliness, which the vacation amidst Vermont's mountain landscapes couldn't quell, was now amplified by this mysterious event. Troubled by this unsettling phenomenon, which seemed more than mere coincidence, Alice decided to seek advice from Madame Clara, a 60-year-old woman known in Willow Creek for her wisdom and connection to the supernatural. Madame Clara, with her hair neatly tied in a bun streaked with silver strands of gray, sat at a large wooden table in her old house on the edge of a dense forest. Her white linen shirt draped softly over her shoulders, creating an image of calm that contrasted with the mysterious atmosphere. Candles flickered, casting warm light on walls adorned with faded photographs, while bundles of dried herbs, sage, lavender, rosemary, and ancient books with yellowed pages filled with herbal recipes and ritual descriptions lay nearby. Outside, the forest hummed, whispering ancestral secrets. Alice entered, feeling the tension in her body ease slightly in this soothing yet enigmatic aura, and recounted the flower's story, describing each glistening drop that looked like blood. Madame Clara, her deep eyes gleaming in the dim light, listened intently and responded in a calm but piercing voice. "It's not the flower weeping, my dear, but the soul of its true owner, trying to express its pain through the plant." Alice protested, goosebumps rising on her skin. "That can't be, Madame Clara. It's just moisture, maybe condensation." But Clara insisted, her tone firm, as if reading an ancient text. "Oh, it can be. You've offended someone close, and now their soul suffers, seeking peace. This flower was brought by David, your husband, wasn't it?" Alice nodded, her heart tightening with memories. "Yes, he gave it to me before his illness. Said it would bring joy to our home. But he died so suddenly. I couldn't stay home after the funeral. Everything reminded me of him." Clara, her voice like a quiet incantation echoing in the forest, continued. "You didn't mourn properly, rushing off to rest, trying to escape the pain. But now you must ask forgiveness from the flower's true owner, or trouble will follow. Grievances don't vanish on their own. They accumulate and return." Alice, feeling the weight of these words, promised, "I'll do everything you say, Madame Clara, I swear. Just tell me how the scent of herbs in the room suddenly intensified, as if David's spirit were truly present." Watching the conversation, and one of the candles on the table abruptly went out, sending a wave of chills down Alice's spine, as if an unseen force confirmed the seer's words. Returning home to Maple Street, Alice felt anxiety gripping her heart, Madame Clara's words echoing like a spell. The night enveloped Willow Creek in thick darkness, and the apartment felt alien. The creak of the old wooden floor sounded like the footsteps of an unseen presence, and a faint whisper of wind outside, despite the calm weather, gave the impression that the house no longer belonged to her alone. To dispel the oppressive atmosphere and calm her nerves, Alice called Kate and invited her over, hoping her friend's support would chase away the darkness that had settled in her soul. Kate arrived quickly, her vibrant energy bringing warmth as always. She brought a thermos of hot vanilla-scented coffee and a box of freshly baked cinnamon cookies, her warm smile lighting up the dim living room, where the only light came from an old lamp with a worn shade. They sat at a small wooden table, where shadows from the flickering light danced on the walls, creating eerie patterns like ghostly silhouettes. Alice, nervously clasping her hands, led Kate to the windowsill and showed her the flower. its glossy leaves glistening with drops that appeared blood red in the evening's dim light, as if the plant wept with the blood of a lost soul. Kate, do you think David's upset with me because of this flower? Alice asked, her voice trembling with a mix of fear, doubt, and hope for an explanation. Kate leaned closer to the plant, her green eyes studying each drop, and though she smiled skeptically, a shadow of concern flickered in her gaze, knowing how sensitive Alice was to such signs. Madame Clara said the grievance comes from the flower's true owner, Kate replied, her voice soft but cautious. David brought it, right? But why would he be angry with you? You two were so close, and you cared for him so devotedly during his illness, never leaving his side, cooking his favorite meals, supporting him when he could barely stand. Alice nodded, her eyes welling with tears as memories of David flooded back. His infectious laughter that filled the house with joy, his strong embraces that made her feel safe, and the quiet moments when he brought her flowers to see her smile. Maybe I need to ask for forgiveness, like Clara suggested, Alice said softly, her voice barely audible, as if afraid to disturb the fragile silence in the room. Kate, sensing her sadness, changed the subject to lighten the mood. Enough of the gloom, Alice. Tell me about your vacation. Show me the photos. I haven't seen them yet. Alice pulled out her phone and began scrolling through pictures, her voice brightening as she recalled the fleeting moments that briefly distracted her from pain. This is me by the river in the Vermont mountains, where the water sparkled under the sun like scattered jewels. And there's the huge waterfall. Its roar was mesmerizing, like it stopped time. And this is the fair in a small town near the hotel. The air was filled with the scent of fresh spices, fried dough, and the laughter of people dancing to the music of local fiddlers. Kate leaned closer to the screen, her eyes lighting up with curiosity. Wow, and who's this handsome guy? Who is he? Alice blushed slightly but smiled, warmed by the memory. That's Ben. We met at the fair. He's tall with thick dark hair and kind brown eyes that radiate calm. We just talked. He listened to my story about David and supported me like a true friend. Kate winked with a playful smile. Well, look at you, Alice. New acquaintances on vacation already? Alice laughed quietly, shaking her head. Oh, come on, it's nothing like that. I told him about my grief, and he understood, not pushing for anything more. We just text sometimes. He shares stories about his travels, and I share memories. Kate, though teasing, saw that Alice wasn't ready for new relationships, and her connection with Ben was purely friendly, warm phone calls on lonely evenings and messages that brought comfort. When Kate left, leaving Alice alone with the apartment's silence, the night grew even denser, and the moonlight filtering through thin curtains bathed the room in a silvery glow. The flower on the windowsill seemed to come alive. Its leaves trembled without any breeze, and the drops on them glistened like blood-red pearls, reflecting the moonlight. Alice, holding her breath, stepped closer and suddenly saw a faint reflection of David's face in those drops, his sad eyes staring straight at her, as if whispering words of unspoken grievance, sending shivers through her body. She stepped back, her heart pounding like a drum, and at that moment, a soft tap sounded at the window, as if someone lightly knocked on the glass, though outside was only the dark garden. That night Alice went to bed, but her sleep was restless. She dreamed of David standing in the thick fog among Vermont's mountains, holding the same flower, from which a red liquid, like blood, slowly dripped. He looked at her with pain, mouthing silently, "Why didn't you ask for forgiveness?" Alice woke in a cold sweat, her heart racing, realizing the flower's mystery was only beginning to unfold, promising new trials. The next morning, to distract herself from anxious thoughts, she went for a walk in Willow Creek Park, where ancient oaks rustled their leaves, as if whispering the town's old legends. Walking along a narrow path, she suddenly noticed a petal, identical to her flowers, lying on the ground, as if placed there by an unseen hand. Alice bent to pick it up, but felt a sharp prick in her finger from a hidden thorn, and a drop of her blood fell to the ground, triggering sudden dizziness. In that moment, it seemed David's spirit touched her soul, passing on a fragment of his pain, and she heard a faint whisper in her ears. Grievances. This was the first true mystical event, confirming Madame Clara's words. Grievances don't vanish on their own. They accumulate, manifesting through physical signs and otherworldly visions, and Alice knew she had to unravel this mystery to avoid further troubles. In a solitary flower weeping blood-red drops of dew, a mystery lay hidden, drawing Alice into the darkness of a supernatural realm where restless souls lingered. A gloomy morning in Willow Creek enveloped the town in heavy gray clouds, looming over rooftops, and rain tapped on windows like the fingers of a ghost trying to reach the living. Alice, a young woman with long chestnut hair falling in soft waves and deep gray eyes hiding the pain of loss, stood by her apartment window on Maple Street, feeling memories of David tighten around her heart. David, her husband, tall, broad-shouldered, with a warm smile and strong arms that were always her refuge, had died from a prolonged illness that slowly drained his life, leaving Alice in an emptiness where every memory of their shared evenings, walks in Willow Creek Park, or quiet coffee conversations cut her heart like a sharp knife. A vacation at a luxurious spa hotel amidst Vermont's picturesque mountains was meant to be an escape from this grief, a way to flee the pain, surrounded by the scents of pine forests and the roar of waterfalls. But returning home opened the door to a mystical enigma hidden in the solitary flower that wept blood-red drops, as if mourning an unresolved grievance from the past. Madame Clara's words about the weeping flower being a sign of an offended soul haunted Alice. She felt an unseen force pulling her into a web of secrets and resolved to act to break the cycle. That morning, as rain drenched Willow Creek and the air smelled of wet earth and something otherworldly, Alice gathered herself and drove to Oak Grove Cemetery, hoping to find answers among old tombstones, where towering oaks whispered ancient legends and fog wove thick tendrils between graves. She walked a narrow path, holding a bouquet of white lilies, David's favorite flowers, and her footsteps echoed in the silence, mingling with the sound of rain. At David's grave, where a granite stone bearing his name stood cold and unmoving, Alice knelt, feeling tears blend with raindrops on her face. "David, forgive me if I've wronged you somehow," she whispered, her voice trembling with pain and hope. "I loved you with all my heart and always will." At that moment, the wind intensified, howling through the trees, and Alice glimpsed a shadow of David flitting among the tombstones, a faint whisper in her ears. Grievances. Tears. The vision was so vivid that Alice's heart clenched, yet it gave her hope she was on the right path. She remembered David, his laughter that filled their home with joy, his strong embraces that made her feel safe, and the moment he gave her that flower, saying it would bring happiness. But now the flower wept, as if accusing her of something, and Alice couldn't shake the feeling that her actions after his death, her hasty vacation, her attempt to escape pain, might have offended his soul. On her way back from the cemetery, where the air was thick with the scent of wet moss and old stone, Alice unexpectedly met her mother-in-law, Margaret Wilson. Margaret, a middle-aged woman with short gray hair, neatly framing her stern face and piercing blue eyes that always looked with reproach, stood under an old oak, holding an umbrella. Her hands trembled with grief, and her voice rang with tension as she spoke. "I see you finally decided to visit David." Alice, feeling guilty, replied softly, "I was out of town, Margaret. I went to the mountains to distract myself from the pain." Margaret shook her head, her eyes narrowing. "Distract yourself?" "I can't distract myself. I think of my son every day. The emptiness in my soul gives me no peace. And Steve's not well. The ambulance comes every other day. I fear he won't get out of bed, Alice. Stung by Margaret's words, promised, I'll visit you soon, Margaret, I promise. At that moment, a strong gust of wind carried a leaf from a nearby tree, landing between them like a sign of fate, and Alice felt a chill, as if an invisible hand brushed her shoulder. She returned home with a heavy heart, sensing that the grievance Madame Clara spoke of might involve not only David, but his family as well. Days later, a new disaster struck Alice's apartment. A water pipe burst, and water gushed onto the floor with a sound like the sobbing of a river from another world. Puddles created chaos, and the water seemed to have a will of its own, forming patterns resembling the tears of the weeping flower. The plumber Alice called only promised to come, but never showed, and in desperation, she thought of Ben, a tall, muscular man with thick dark hair and kind brown eyes radiating calm. They had met during her vacation at a fair in the mountains, where he listened to her story of losing David and became a source of support. Alice dialed his number, her voice trembling with panic. Ben, hi, I'm in trouble. The pipe burst. Can you help? Ben arrived quickly, his tools gleaming in the apartment's dim light, and within an hour, he fixed the issue. Job done? He smiled, wiping his hands. Alice, grateful, replied, You're a lifesaver. How can I thank you? Ben, with a gentle smile, suggested, Maybe go out with me sometime. Alice shook her head, her eyes filled with sadness. Ben, I'm not ready for that, you know. She felt fondness for him, but in the dripping sound of the pipe, she heard a whisper like David's voice warning her. At that moment, the window pane fogged up, and a faint outline of a face appeared, vanishing as Alice approached, leaving her with the sense that the otherworldly was watching. Unexpectedly, Margaret arrived unannounced, her footsteps echoing in the hallway, like a reverberation from the past. She held several bowls, her face stern. I brought back your bowls from my birthday, she said coldly, but upon seeing Ben packing his tools, her eyes flared with anger. What's this? Have you no shame? Bringing men here, dishonoring my son's memory. Alice tried to explain, her voice shaking. Margaret, it's not what you think. This is Ben. He just helped with the pipe. But Margaret wouldn't listen, her words sharp as a knife. I see what I see. Poor David, you didn't grieve long. Were you stepping out on him while he was alive? She slammed the door, leaving Alice in tears. That night, Alice couldn't sleep, haunted by a nightmare. Margaret stood in darkness, holding the flower dripping blood, as the apartment walls cracked, as if the house itself mourned the grievance. Waking in the morning, Alice found strange red marks on her hands burning like fresh wounds. She called Kate, who urged her to see a doctor. Alice, go to Dr. Greenwood. He's the best in town. Did he say anything about a diagnosis? Alice shook her head. Not yet. He ordered tests. Said he's never seen anything like it. The doctor, a gray-haired man with kind eyes, examined her and said, puzzled, Strange, I've never seen this. It's not like an allergy or infection, but we'll check. That night, the marks on Alice's skin glowed faintly in the dark, and a soft moan came from behind the wall, as if David's soul was calling her. A walk through Willow Creek streets only heightened her anxiety. In a flower shop's window, she saw a similar plant, and the glass fogged up, forming David's face, which vanished instantly, leaving Alice in terror and anticipation of new trials. In a solitary flower, weeping blood-red drops of dew, a mystery lay hidden, drawing Alice into the darkness of a supernatural realm where restless souls lingered. The night in Willow Creek enveloped her apartment on Maple Street in thick darkness, and the patter of rain on the windows sounded like ghostly fingers begging to be let in. Alice, a young woman with long chestnut hair and gray eyes filled with pain, stood in the center of her living room, feeling memories of David tear at her heart. David, her husband, tall with a warm smile and strong arms that were her refuge, had died from a prolonged illness, leaving her in an emptiness where every memory of their shared evenings, laughter, or tender touches cut her heart like a knife. A vacation in Vermont's mountains, among pine forests and waterfalls, was meant to be an escape from grief. But returning home opened the door to a mystical enigma hidden in the weeping flower, its blood-red drops accusing Alice of an old grievance. The red marks on Alice's skin, appearing after her confrontation with Margaret, burned as if alive, and she felt they were tied to the flower. Madame Clara's words about needing to seek forgiveness from the plant's true owner echoed in her mind like a relentless incantation. In desperation, Alice threw out the flower, hoping to end the curse, but the marks only grew, and her dreams filled with nightmares. David stood in fog, holding the plant, blood dripping from it, looking at her with reproach. Unable to bear it, Alice returned to Madame Clara, whose house on the forest's edge seemed a portal to the other world. Inside, candles flickered, casting shadows on walls with faded photographs, and the scent of dried herbs, sage, lavender, wormwood, filled the air. Madame Clara, her hair in a bun streaked with gray, wearing a white linen shirt, sat at a wooden table cluttered with ancient books. Her eyes gleamed as Alice described the marks. "I saw them on the flower, and now they're on me." Clara shook her head. "I warned you. Ask for forgiveness. This flower isn't David's, though he brought it." Find its true owner, Alice, feeling helpless, asked, "But where do I find a cutting to fix this?" Clara's voice was like a forest whisper. "It's closer than you think. Remember, this person isn't a stranger." At that moment, a candle on the table flickered, as if affirming her words, and Alice felt a cold breath on her neck, as if a spirit watched her. Back home, Alice began recalling who the flower might belong to. She flipped through old family albums, where photos of a smiling, happy David broke her heart. In one picture, a family picnic in Willow Creek Park, she noticed the same plant in the background near David's parents' house. Alice suspected the grievance might stem from Margaret Wilson, who reacted sharply to her post-funeral vacation. She called Margaret, but the calls were rejected, so Alice, summoning her courage, drove to her mother-in-law's house on Oak Street, where old oaks hummed in the wind, as if warning her. Margaret met her coldly, standing at the door with a stern face, her gray hair in a tight bun. "What do you want?" Alice, her voice trembling, replied, "Margaret, hear me out. I had a problem. The pipe burst, and Ben just helped fix it." Margaret cut her off, her eyes flashing. "Ben? You're dishonoring David's memory with suitors." Alice tried to explain, "It's not what you think," but Margaret slammed the door. Amid the chaos, Alice noticed a cutting similar to her flower in the house, and unable to resist, took it, hoping it would help. But at home, Kate revealed that the plant wasn't David's gift, but came from her father-in-law, Steve Wilson, a gray-haired man with tired eyes, his voice trembling with the pain of losing his son. The cutting wouldn't take root, and the marks on Alice's skin grew, burning more intensely. She returned to Madame Clara, whose house was shrouded in fog, candles casting shadows like soul silhouettes. "The cutting won't grow, and I'm covered in marks," Alice said, showing her hands. Clara sighed. "A stolen cutting won't help. You need to grow a new one." She gave Alice a bulb and a small vial of enchanted water. "Plant the bulb, care for it, and say daily, 'The first leaf is repentance, the second forgiveness, the third reconciliation.' Wipe your skin with the water once a day. No new marks will appear." Alice felt hope, her hands trembling as she took the bulb, and the scent of herbs grew stronger, as if spirits approved her resolve. At home, Alice planted the bulb in a pot, tending it carefully, watering it, reciting Clara's words, and wiping her skin with the enchanted water. Days later, the first leaves sprouted, and Alice felt the pain in her skin ease. She called Margaret, her voice full of sincerity. "Margaret, good evening. Please don't hang up. I need to talk." After a pause, Margaret replied, "Fine, come over tonight." That evening, Alice entered the house on Oak Street, where Margaret greeted her unexpectedly warmly, though her eyes still held pain. "I want to apologize for everything," Alice said, showing the marks on her hands. "This is punishment for how I treated you." Margaret sighed. "It hurts me for David. You left right away, not staying with us in our grief." Alice tearfully replied, "I had to. I couldn't bear the emptiness in the apartment." Then she turned to Steve, sitting in an armchair, his face pale from illness. "Steve, I came to apologize. I know you're hurt because I didn't let you say goodbye to David." Steve, his voice trembling, replied, "I wanted to see my son one last time, but you hoped he'd recover." "I forgive you," Alice wept, feeling the weight lift from her shoulders. The next morning, the marks on her skin vanished, as if they'd never been. Alice began regularly visiting Margaret and Steve, helping with chores and supporting them like a daughter. She explained to Ben that she wasn't ready for a new relationship, and he understood, remaining a friend. Alice returned to Madame Clara to thank her, and Clara, sitting among herbs and candles, said, "Remember, if dew appears on a plant, it's a sign of grievance. Always ask for forgiveness, or the soul won't find peace." Outside, the forest roared louder, as if agreeing, and Alice felt she'd finally found peace, though she knew the mysteries of the other world would always linger nearby. Friends, thank you for living this touching love story with us. If it struck a chord in your heart, like and subscribe to True Stories of Fate to catch our next captivating tale of destiny and mystique. Share your own love or mystical stories in the comments. We can't wait to read them. See you in the next video, where another chapter of love and life awaits.